Hi, everybody. As you can see up there, my name is Max Vetter. I'm the VP of Cyber at Immersive. Bit of my background, started life as a private investigator for the International Chamber of Commerce, and then moved into the Met Police in London, did that for 7 years or so, and then GCHQ for a few years as a contractor. And at GCHQ, we met James Hadley, who's Immersive's founder, and he got the idea for Immersive when we were working together there. And so I joined him a year and a bit after the start, after Kev. And so I've been here 6 years now. So I run the cyber team. So all the labs, all the exercises, all the simulations are created by my team. And it'll be good. We'll go through. I've given 2 interviews about this today, so hopefully I should know a bit of what I'm talking about. I'm going to kind of act as I do normally, the manager, a non-technical person, and the kind of CISO figure, whereas Kev's going to be more the technical blue teamer, everything else. But we'll get into that. I'll let Kev introduce himself.
So I'm Kev Breen. So I am the Senior Director Threat Research here at Immersive. A little bit about me. So I've been with Immersive for 7.5 years now. After James Hadley, the founder, I've got the longest tenure here at the company. Part of the furniture, they just can't get rid of me. It's not because I do anything good here or anything. Before that, I ran SOC and CERT operations for a large defense contractor. Before that, I ran defensive operations for UK MOD, which I did for about 15 years or so, out of the Joint Cyber Unit. Before that, I was on the wrong side of the fence, where it was cool and okay to hack your school and other websites and dial into BBSs and things like that, because there were no real laws that we cared about then. That has all changed very dramatically. So like Max said, I look after the team that does all of our cyber threat intelligence, our research, all of our same-day labs, so tracking threat actors, the things they're doing, and then turning that into practical experiences for all of our users. I am a blue teamer by heart, but I do have my red team skills, because purple teaming does make you a better network defender. So that is me.
You started as hacking as well.
Yeah.
Hacking is cool. Next slide, please, go. Oh, this is something I don't know. This is a picture of, there's M&S, there's Co-op, there's Harrods, there's Adidas, there's what else? North Face, Cartier, so a lot. We'll talk mostly about M&S and Co-op because that's affected us here in the UK. But there's this last 2 months has been massive for retail in a bad way in terms of ransomware attacks, and just a bit of the impact. M&S lost 300 million in just cash and profits, billion off their stock price. Co-op, if you know about Co-op, there's co-ops all over the UK, but particularly in kind of remote places. So there was actually quite a lot of risk around vulnerable adults, like in Ireland and Scotland, where the only shop is a Co-op, and if they ran out of food, those people could die. So that you wouldn't ever thought of Co-op necessarily as being critical national infrastructure, and I think Co-op's 10th and M&S is 8th kind of biggest supermarket in the UK. So not even that big, but a massive impact. And then, the Harrods, again, they kind of shut down their systems, and they seem to get away with it better because there's not a huge online presence. I think Marks & Spencer's and Co-op are around 13-14 billion revenue, and Harrods about 1 billion. Obviously, Adidas is bigger, but the attacks on Adidas and North Face seem smaller anyway. So that's a kind of a background to it. If we just click onto hopefully, there you go. There's something on that slide. 19th of April. So, Kev, you're working at M&S on the 19th of April. From what I've seen, it's more the customers that actually told M&S rather than an amazing blue teamer like you. Oh no. So what happens on the 19th of April in the blue team at M&S?
Yeah, this is always a really interesting thing, because With large organizations, you expect them to have more visibility. You expect them to have better rulings, better detection, better alerts. What actually happens is they just have more volume of logs and more volume of alerts and more volume of noise. And in fact, show of hands, how many people here have worked in a SOC as an analyst role? Oh, none of you. You're lucky. Yeah, so when you're in the SOC, we have this thing we call alert fatigue, where the larger your organization is, the more alerts you're getting. And as an analyst, you've got to go through all of them and figure out, are these true positives? Are these false positives? Are they true negatives? And that. And there's a whole process for rule tuning, but it takes time and it never goes away. So what you see is you will lag behind, especially on a day. So middle of the afternoon, if you're running in shifts, you've come in, you're handed over the shift, you're picking up the things that they were looking at, because there's going to be routine security incidents. Everybody is attacked every second of every day. 90% of them never make it further than the firewall, but you've still got to check and follow through to make sure they haven't. So you've got this constant flow of things that are happening. And then as you're going through that, the backlog is building up behind you. So it is more than likely that what's going to happen is customers are going to start complaining, services are going to start to go offline, and your operations department will know long before the security department does. And that's the way this is going to go. And then what's going to happen is you're going to be sat in the SOC, you've got this medium priority ticket that you've been dealing with for a couple of days, and then you get a tap on the shoulder and somebody's saying, something's gone very wrong. Apparently we're suffering a ransomware attack. We should probably figure out what's going on. And then all of your playbooks kick in. Hopefully you've got playbooks. Hopefully you've practiced them. They'll start to kick in, and panic ensues pretty quickly after that.
Okay, if I'm the CISO, what's going on? It's the 20th of April, and you haven't told me there's anything wrong, but people can't pay online.
Yeah, and this is the thing. So again, show of hands, who's familiar with a classic ransomware attack? So a couple, like most of you have heard what it is. So the way this works in modern ransomware as a service, we're talking e-crime, they're financially motivated attackers. And what they do is they come in, and the first thing they do is they stay as quiet as they can. They gain access to a variety of techniques. They stay quiet and they start stealing data. They find things that are valuable to the organization. They want to know information that they can use to move further. That's always valuable. So getting domain credentials, domain dumps, but they're also looking for documents, anything that they can use to hold you over a barrel. Once they've got that, they will stage it all and they will steal all of that data. They'll compress it, they'll exfiltrate it from the network, and they'll store it somewhere on their servers. So they have stolen that data. That is usually tens of gigs worth of data from everything they can find. Then they deploy the ransomware. And the ransomware is pretty targeted. It is designed to encrypt files that a company wants without crippling the entire operating systems. So it's not designed to destroy the operating system. That's a separate thing. For ransomware, they just care about encrypting that data that is valuable to you whilst leaving the operating systems intact. If they go full destruction, then what comes next doesn't work, because there's no need for you to pay because you've got nothing to recover them onto anyway. And so that's what they've done. They encrypt everything, and then you'll get a text message on a desktop or a file text or something that says, we have encrypted all your files and we're going to charge you this much money in order for you to decrypt them. And that's how it started. It was just documents. They very quickly learned over the last couple of years that encrypting documents is impactful, but not always enough. It's easy to recover without those documents. So they started encrypting things like the databases that contain the data, that contain the customer data. So they start encrypting databases. And once that happens, now systems are offline. So the domain is still up. People are still able to log into their computers, into their Windows environments. But those services that are running those key things, like your point of sale systems that rely on these connections to databases, they all start to fail. And there is only two ways, well, technically there's three ways of recovering that. You delete everything and start again with no data. You hope and pray that you've got backups, and those backups haven't also been encrypted, and you try to recover back to those, which is usually yesterday's snapshot. So you're still losing a bit of data, or you're paying the ransom, and then there's a whole load of pain that comes from that. But to answer the question, the CISO comes down. I've worked in these kind of pressure environments. Got a question? A second. I'm just going to throw you the... Oh, there we go.
Isn't paying the ransom now illegal in the UK? I can't remember whether that legislation came in yet.
So, great question on the legality of paying ransoms. So, I don't, not a lawyer or law enforcement, I don't believe that is law in the UK right now. In the US, it is law for specific ransomware groups that are on a list. So they have a list of organizations that are classified as terrorists. I say organizations, ransomware organizations that are classed as terrorist groups. They're on a sanctions list. It is illegal to pay those. We still see them being paid. That's where ransomware brokers come into play. But yes, here in the UK, best guidance from NCSC and law enforcement is never pay the ransom, but it is not a criminal offence to pay the ransom.
I'll step in as the CEO. I want my services back online, Kev. If I pay the ransom, will that happen faster?
So I will answer that question in a second. So show of hands, just because I'm interested, I love this question. So you're Marks and Spencers, and you make the decision. So you are cash flush. You've got plenty of money in your bank accounts. You've got 300 million sat in the bank. The ransom is 5 million. These aren't real numbers. I'm just making them up. Who here would pay the ransom? So
there you go.
We've got. Well, I'm ignoring Kieran. So everybody says no, and every time we ask this question, everybody says no. However, statistically speaking, more people pay the ransom than not. So either all of you are the best in society, or some of you are lying. Yeah. To actually answer the question, though, for me, it's difficult because the way the ransomware systems work is they honor their ransoms. If you pay them the money, they do give you the decryptor. And 8 times out of 10, that decryptor just works. If it didn't, their entire operator model would fail and nobody would ever pay a ransom. So if you don't have really good hygiene, if you don't have really good backups, and you are providing critical services, then actually, I hate to say it, but I'm saying that maybe we should pay the ransom. If we've got backups and we've got backup strategy in place, we're not paying the ransom. We're going to go into that. If we don't have those things, or we know those things are going to take too long, and we know that paying the money, getting that decryptor key is going to shorten that life cycle, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of pro paying the ransom in those situations because, to your point, and not necessarily for Marks and Spencer, but if you think like hospitals, and we've seen cases where people have actually died as a result of this, if I'm in that position and by doing nothing and taking the legal, ethical route, I'm putting more lives at risk, then for me, paying the ransomware, whilst I am funding a terrorist organization, there is a gain to that. And heaven forbid any of you ever end up in that situation. I don't envy you. Oh, sorry, yeah.
What are the consequences? There are other consequences if you don't pay the ransom. For example, with the threat actors splash it all over the dark web.
Yes. So double extortion is exactly that. And that's why they steal that information in the first instance. So that if you don't pay the ransom to recover your data, you're now having to consider paying the ransom so that the entire world doesn't get that data that you're leaking to them. Caesar's Palace, I want to say, they ended up paying the ransom not to recover the data, but to stop that data being leaked. And it worked. They paid 13 million, I want to say, somewhere in that region. They paid, and they only paid so that customer data would not go into the world. And that's a classic double extortion scheme we unfortunately see a lot of.
Yeah, as an ex-police officer, obviously never pay the bad guys.
Yes.
As the CEO, CISO, I would absolutely pay the ransom. And 85% of all CEOs and CISOs do. So it's very good of you all to say that you do. But the fact is, for a private company, if you don't pay the ransom and you have no way of quickly coming back up, then that's your business. So you're going to be out of business anyway. So what's more of a priority? The money that you pay the ransom, or the money that will keep, they lost 300 million just from sales. 45% of all sales were on their online, online. So yeah, they did come out and say it was a cyber attack. They suspended online payments. Then the information came out about Scatter Spider, but we'll come to Scatter Spider in a bit. And then 30th of April, Co-op impacted as well. And yeah, that's a good one. Co-op told staff to stop using the VPN and to turn all cameras on in meetings. If your company did that to you, would you think they had it? They nailed it? They're like, oh yeah, these guys know what they're doing. Or would you be like, I'm really worried that they're telling me to turn the camera on, because that's the best way of identifying hackers. What would you think about your management if they?
Not a terrible way.
But do you think you would? Yeah. And not using the VPN. We kind of thought VPNs were good things, right?
That's personal VPNs, right? Not company VPN.
No, I think that's the company VPN.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Because
the VPN, they've got other issues.
well, the VPN was the thing that was compromised.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to talk to how they compromised it.
Yeah, so there's a number of different approaches that we're seeing. So what we've seen a real spate of over the last 8-9 months is the actual security appliances that we have in our perimeters being the thing that are weaponized against us. So VPN SSL appliances were a big target. And so big vendors as well, Cisco, Citrix, Fortinet, F5, they all had massive critical vulnerabilities discovered by threat actors in those platforms that were used to then weaponize this. And it's a trend that we see time and time again. It's a trend that we can talk about in a second. So what usually happens is a researcher or a threat actor will find a vulnerability in something like an SSL appliance. And then that will become public, either because the threat actor has weaponized it or because the researcher has published it and it's been patched. What has effectively just happened there is you've just chummed all of the water with blood. Because now every other researcher, every other threat actor is now going, ooh, where there's one, there's probably more. And there always is. And that's what they do. So the threat actors go and look at, they find other vulnerabilities in the same devices or in adjacent devices or other vendors who are providing the same services. And we saw the same thing happen with the ransomware operators in how they were choosing their targets. So M&S were first, Co-op a very close second. And then these obviously became, because of the impact they had, these became very public very quickly. And then other threat actors, other ransomware groups went, hey, I know other retailers, and they're probably all using the same technology, the same process.
I was just about to ask that question. Was M&S and Co-op, did they have some of the same tooling they were using with .com?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So we then see other ransomware operators going, well, that sector has lots of crossover in the same way that the financial services sector has a lot of the same tooling. The manufacturing sector has a lot of the same tooling. The retail sector has a lot of the same tooling. So where we see one compromise, we start to see others. And then we literally saw that play out, where over the next days and weeks, other retail organizations were hit, not by the same group, not using the exact same methodologies, but very similar techniques, very similar processes.
And then just to finish this slide off, June 10th, so that's 2 days ago, M&S Online came back online. So 2 months. Now, in your experience, seems quite long to be offline. Do you know, or because I haven't seen this, but did they pay the ransom? Did they back up? They do it themselves.
So we still don't know. Given the amount of time, I'm going to, and this is a complete guess, I'm going to assume that they didn't choose to pay the ransom to recover. Now, they may have chosen to pay the ransom to prevent data leakage going public, but given the timelines, I think one of two things is at play. Either they didn't pay the ransomware and therefore went into full disaster recovery, or if they did pay the ransomware, they've taken the time to then go through and harden their systems to make sure there isn't still some trace to put other things in place. So being in the retail sector, they are going to be PCI DSS compliant, or they're going to have to be PCI DSS compliant. So if I was a regulator, and the regulators will have been involved at this point, I would probably turn around and say something like, you're not allowed to trade until you can confirm that your systems are secure, that data is secure, and that the likelihood isn't going to go down again. So something interesting that we see is that ransomware groups have also grown better at understanding how vendors use technology. They don't just go after Active Directory domains. We're also starting to see them go after virtualized environments. And that brings in a whole other layer of confusion. And a lot of the ransomware is now designed just to target ESXi servers specifically, because they know that if they can take all those systems offline, that's going to have an impact. And those things are even harder to recover, because whilst you might have database backups, and database backups can compress down and can go into hard drive storage that you can lock in a cabinet, you cannot do that with ESXi at scale, especially with things like SQL servers. You can have hot and cold storage. If you want to try and do that with virtualization technology, especially ESXi, especially the way Broadcom took over ESXi and changed their entire licensing model, that is so expensive. It's prohibitively expensive to be able to do those things. And if you want to try and recover ESXi services onto a clean ESXi server, you've got to engage with Broadcom to get a new set of licenses to spin stuff up so you can transfer stuff across. Becomes a mess when you're going into recovery. So I think all of those things are probably why it's taken them so long to recover. I think they probably had services restored earlier, but they've gone through and they've gone, before we come back online, we need to be super confident that there's nothing in place. So yeah.
Next slide, please, Kieran. So let's talk about this amazing slide, which is just talking about the Dragon Force and Scatter Spider. Yeah, so let's start with Dragon Force. You probably can't read this, but it says, this is a Dragon Force post. It says, Dragon Force ransomware cartel. So let's start with ransomware as a service. Does anyone understand ransomware as a service? Yeah, a few people. So let's start there, and then let's go to the cartel.
So if we go back a little bit further, so the evolution of ransomware. So this all started 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, with what we called scareware at the time. So this was, you would be on the internet, you'd hit a website, and all of a sudden you get a pop-up saying that your computer has been locked by law enforcement for some reason, and you have to pay $300 in order to unlock it. All you had to do was just close the window and you were completely fine. It was literally just scareware. We saw an evolution of that where they then started to do things like hitting the human psychology factor. So we saw them using child exploitative imagery as part of those, and say, you have been caught downloading child pornography, to try and force that scare factor in a little bit more. That worked, but again, they're targeting individuals, so there's a fairly low return on investment. They are acting like a business. So they decided to move from what we called scareware into more classic ransomware. WannaCry was probably the first one of these that really hit at scale, and I'm pretty sure everybody here is familiar with the WannaCry thing. And that is where you then as a collective, as a threat group, we designed something to do exactly that, to encrypt. And it did that, and it was still fairly low pricing. It was only a few $100s in order to have WannaCry decrypted. Because again, they weren't targeting the organization, they were targeting individuals at scale. It just so happened that if you're every individual in an organization, you took down the entire organization. That then set up the next wave where it was like, actually, we're going to start targeting organizations rather than targeting individuals. And then that led us into what they call the affiliate program. So that is the idea that I, as a ransomware operator, as a ransomware author, I've written this ransomware, but it's pretty dicey for me to be controlling the ransomware and hacking into companies and managing the negotiations and managing the giving them the keys afterwards. So what they started to do was say, hey, I'm just going to sell my ransomware. I'm not going to be doing any of the hacking. I'm not going to be doing any of the compromise. I'm just going to run this small part of that operation where I will sell my ransomware and people can buy it from me. That then evolved again a little bit where it's like, actually, I'm not just going to sell you my ransomware as a one-off price for $3,000. I'm going to license my ransomware to you in exchange for 20% of whatever you make. So you are responsible for going and doing the attacking, the hacking. Once you break into a system, here is my ransomware. You run that. We'll take the payments. We'll keep 20%. 80% goes to you. And that's how the affiliate programs started. They actually call them their own red teams. They're not hacking you. They're just testing you. So that's ransomware as a service. And that's where that really started to boom. And then we move into the cartels. They are still effectively just a ransomware as a service. They still operate the affiliates. But what they've done is they've taken that a step further, and they've said that not only are we going to manage the ransomware and the support and the payments and the processing, we're also going to manage all of the infrastructure for you. So you want VPNs, you want staging hosts, you want places to store the stolen data. We will do all of that for you. So literally all you have to do is compromise them or buy access to them from an access broker, deploy this stuff out, and we've taken care of it for you. It's effectively just white labeling ransomware and getting paid for it.
What we actually found with M&S is Dragon Force contacted BBC. So M&S was saying things about, there's no customer data been breached, and Dragon Force gave BBC 2 million bits of user data to prove that they had stolen it. And so they're actually acting as, and that's a whole other, say I'm the CEO, I'm dealing with the PR team and the marketing team trying to deal with this attack. Now you've got people actually on the other side coming out against you saying, yeah, they're lying, which is a whole other, and they do say that in their services, they'll kind of talk to the press for you as part of the cartel. So it's that's a whole other thing that you've got to think about, is they are now out there talking to the BBC and giving these updates to them.
And we've seen, because the thing that, like, these people have no morals. Like, you'll see them do posts like, we'll never ransom hospitals and stuff like that, but they will. And like, I think one of the most impactful ones that I saw was where they hit a mental health facility in the US. And the mental health facility were like, well, we're not going to pay you. So what the threat actors did is they took the patient information, they started messaging the patients individually, saying that we are going to release all of your recordings, all of your session notes and everything, unless you go and tell the healthcare provider they need to pay us. So yeah, they will do whatever they can to force organizations into paying, even if the police decided that they were going to break their own rules and say that we would pay. The law just won't allow for them to be able to do that. It's unfortunate that's where they are. Ransomware.live is a site that tracks the ransomware operators, and it's all open source intelligence. But what you'll find there is actual histories of conversations that victims have had with ransomware operators. They're all anonymized, so they're not revealing any sensitive information, but it is a fascinating and terrifying insight.
Yeah. I looked through that the other day, and I found because you can see the ransom that was asked for first, and then the ransom that was paid, and I found the kind of biggest disparity because they asked for 4 million, and then they ended up paying kind of 50,000, and it was because the company was bankrupt, and they'd convinced them that, look, we're bankrupt, you've got all our data, so you can see that we're bankrupt. But it was very weird because you go through these conversations where at the end, this person, the victim, was saying like, "Oh, how do I secure my network?" And he's asking for cybersecurity advice from them. And the ransomware operator was saying, "No, don't worry, we won't be able to get back in. If you do MFA, if you do, password management," he's giving them kind of basic cybersecurity advice. It's the weirdest thing to read, and they're quite professional about it. They don't kind of threaten you, or they just say, "Oh, pay the ransom," and then they just have this negotiation. But it's very strange that this victim was talking to the ransomware operator and trying to get some cybersecurity advice from them.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
well, not for free.
No,
They're definitely paying for that in one way.
So we're coming to the end of this talk. Anything else you want to add, and any more questions about?